Everyone enjoys getting out on the town for some live music. And there's nothing like going backstage and down the hall for a VIP pass to the inside information and interviews with the bands, singers, and songwriters that you enjoy. Welcome to All Around Town Radio.
Working for the weekend, and I want to see a show. I flip on the book of face. Yeah, I know where to go. There's a man over there into the music scene, showing lots of love for the community. With great advice, I know who I should go see. So
good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to All Around Town Radio and what we call Hot Topic Tuesday. I am a little under the weather today. My voice sounds like Peter Brady from that episode of him going through puberty, but we'll make it through this thing today. And welcome one and all. Let's see who's checking in here real quick, and I'll say hi to some folks. Got a special guest today too on the show. Going to be some fun. And Matt says got a theme song. I do. I've got a theme song by Sweet Sister Mercy. Thank you to those guys. That's the abbreviated version. There's a 3-minute version of it. We'll play at the end of the show for everybody out there. But I am Scott Hall, your host of Hot Topic Tuesday. My co-host Karis is on special assignment today. So special assignment. Believe that. And I'm bringing in Mr. Kevin Cooper today to join me as co-host. How you doing, Kev?
I am good today, Scott. How are you?
Oh, it's great. Other than my voice, you're going to do a lot of talking today because I sound a little squeaky, but we're going to have some
first time ever, but I'll try to talk as much as possible.
Yeah, Kevin, I've heard you talk before. Sometimes it's adult beverages that create that, but we love it.
So I have no excuse right now. I'm completely clean as of now.
Me too. That's probably what I need. I probably need a little JMO or something to cure this throat thing. But a lot of people saying hi here. We've got a great topic today. You may have seen it on the page. We're going to talk about sound, and we're going to talk about the pros and cons of a sound guy or sound person, I should say, to be politically correct. And we're going to talk about a few other things, a little bit of bug me's from the sound guys and a little bit of bug me's from the band and things like that. And many times bands hire their own sound person, and we're going to really dig deep into that because I think that's more important than going into a place that has a house sound person. That can sometimes be a little more difficult, and we'll chat about it at the end. But Kevin, we got a bunch of people side piece the band in here. Butch Snyder, thank you for being here. Steve Stein, a lot of musicians today. Skip from Liars for Hire. Jimmy Kilroy, thank you for being with us today. Jim's trying to get over COVID.
Geez, get better, Jim.
Yeah, we love Jim, and luckily that's not what I have. I just have this nagging respiratory thing.
You just have the goo that's been going around for the last.
The goo. I've avoided it up until this week, but I got the goo. Ray Renee, Glenn checking in on YouTube. Thank you. Marcy from Mr. Burrows. How are you? Thank you for being with us. Liz, Mrs. All Around Town Radio is here, and Matt Matheny. Thank you for that. Sound guy's the heart of the operation. He said so. Kevin. Let's get this party started. We're gonna get a bunch of comments, but you play in a variety of bands. For those that don't know Kevin, he plays in Eyes Up Here. He plays in the Hanky Panks. He does his own thing solo, so he's pretty well versed. And then he's also a host of the Jam at the Bell and the Bear, which is a pretty big production every week to try to pull that off with all the different people plugging in and out. So let's talk about when do you think it's appropriate, Kevin, for a band or even a solo artist to have a sound person?
Well, I think a couple big factors. One is just the scale of the gig. If you're playing the Blue Note, don't take your own sound system. If you're on the main stage, for instance, and believe me, no band playing the main stage of the Blue Note has that confusion. If you're playing solo, it's particularly if it's a small venue like a coffee shop, small restaurant sort of situation where maybe all you need is you, a guitar, a microphone, and one speaker. A sound guy would be overkill in that situation as well. But really another factor is, do you understand how to run sound? And maybe you understand how to run like a small, like a solo or a duo gig with no problem. And even if you are capable of running like a full band in, like, say, a mid-sized bar restaurant type venue, are you punching above your weight if you try to run your own sound like an outdoor festival or a private event where it's more spread out? You've got to reach more area. It really just kind of depends on the situation, like whether you're comfortable running your own sound and honestly also whether the budget for the gig supports it, because a great many of them really don't.
And that's one there that I kind of tend to. Spirited discussion's a good word for it. I get in spirited discussions with venue owners because they're like, oh, this band wants to charge me $250 more for a sound man. We're talking bigger venues. And right. I always say to them, do you have any idea how much that microphone costs that's sticking in the front of the kick drum that the drummer's playing? And they're all like, no, you know what, $100? No. You know, I mean, they've got to somehow make that money back eventually on their investment. Sound production is the worst investment in the world unless you're doing national acts and festivals. I mean, you know that, and I know that.
Well, as with sound equipment, musical instruments, anything. I mean, you're potentially upside down on anything if you don't play out a lot and get a return on that. And as far as pricing the gig, I know this is not a discussion about pricing the gig, but just in terms of whether you factor in the sound tech as part of that. I think it really depends on how you sell, and are you packaging this as an overall product that you're selling to the venue? So like when I play, say when the Hanky Panks plays the Bell and the Bear, I don't think Karis wants to see me itemize every last little thing. What she wants to know is what's the price tag and what experience am I going to get for that? And in that case, okay, well, you're going to have a band on stage. There's going to be sound of some reasonable quality. There's going to be lights of some reasonable quality, and the show's going to flow and such. So really, to me, it's all one thing. It's up to the band really to determine how to parcel out that pay once that has been determined. Now, in my particular case, since I know how to run sound, and I am a sound engineer as well, I don't tend to hire out my own sound engineer for those gigs. But if I'm playing something in, like I said, much bigger area, I'm probably going to need help there, and I'm going to price it accordingly. And if my price is too high for the venue, then either I'm not delivering a good enough product, or we're just not going to see eye to eye on the price, and then we move on to the next opportunity. So everything's a case by case.
And thank you, folks, for tuning in today. By the way, if you're just tuning in, Karis is on special assignment today. Kevin Cooper has joined me as co-host of the show, and we're talking about sound. And we're talking about a lot of things today, but we've been touching a little bit about when it's appropriate for a sound man's, as it's referred to in the biz, or sound engineer, to take hold of that sound and do your sound for you. And it has to do a lot of times with price. We know that. It has to do with band price. And many bands, I think, go into a bigger gig and oftentimes think we can pull this off. And I've seen some of them pull it off very well, where they get out, do a good sound check and those kind of things. If you're setting up 20 minutes before the gig, though, sometimes that can be a little bit exciting, so to speak, when you hit the stage for the first time and the sound's just not where it ought to be. And I've seen many a venue owner cringe, saying, oh, this is not what we're paying for tonight. This sounds horrible. And it's all about knowing your equipment and knowing the stuff. I've heard single guys sound great and single guys sound terrible. I've heard full bands sound like CD quality. I mean, you go hear DV8, Kevin. I mean, Todd Buck running sound. I mean, that is pristine sound. It's some of the best you'll ever hear. And it's you've heard other bands that just, unfortunately, the band's good, but the sound ruins the night. And that sounds very important. It is. It's one of the most important things. Like Matt Matheny said, it's the sound guy is at the heart of the operation.
Well, I would agree with that. Sound guy is the heart of the operation. That sound guy may or may not be on your stage playing an instrument at the time. Either way, it all falls on somebody. And granted, bands will try to go it alone on the sound without hiring somebody, even though they don't have the skill. Now, like in my case, I would not consider myself to have always been a good sound engineer. I'm sure probably for the first half of my music career, I really wasn't that great at it. I learned a lot of things along the way. I looked over a lot of shoulders. I got it down to where I've got a good set of reasonable defaults I can use. It's like with digital mixers, it helps a lot as well, because you can go into a room, you've already got all the bad vocal frequencies notched out and all of that, and you set it up and you can make some tweaks from there. But you do have to get out front and check things and make sure it's going to work. And another very, very important factor, in my opinion, is you're better off starting a little on the quiet side and working your volume up.
Yes.
Making sure stage volume, and by stage volume, I mean the sound of the band. If you turn the PA off, what you hear remaining, that's the stage volume. If everybody's too loud on stage, your sound guy can't really do anything with it. He can't.
And so often that's the case.
On stage.
And that was the next segue into this. Bands have to respect a sound person. And, many times a larger band goes into a venue, they have their house sound guy. All I've heard in my lifetime is, I hate dealing with house sound guys, blah, blah, blah. Well, equally, house sound guys hate dealing with musicians. So right. at times, they do. Because everybody wants more 4K in their monitor, or this or that or the other. And they all have these little techno lingo terms that the sound guy's usually sitting out there with his hand on his head going, really, I watched a national act sound check for 3.5 hours one day. Standing in the hot sun, the band was wanting to kill their lead singer because he's out there in the middle of the audience area going, I need more 4K.
And cupping the mic at the same time.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So let's keep this in a vein. We want some comments to come from the audience. So how many of you out there think it's appropriate to have a sound guy? And when is it appropriate to have a sound person? When does it get to that point? I'm not a believer that a solo or duo needs a sound person if they're playing your neighborhood pub or whatever. I think that's a little overkill sometimes. But if you're using a digital device and you can run out there with the iPad occasionally and check it out, that's probably a big helper. I know you probably do that on Soundcheck, Kevin.
Yeah, it's not as good as having somebody dedicated writing the faders in real time as things change around. But yeah, and Marcy's a venue owner. She understands it's and as a band, I'm always big, and I know probably half this chat has heard me say this. I'd always be rather told to turn up than down. Also, it serves the band well to watch interactions in the room while we're playing. If they're struggling to hear people order at the bar, or if people are struggling 5 feet from you to talk to each other, you might be a bit loud unless it's like a dedicated concert venue where it's expected that all eyes are on you. And that's all that's going on. It really depends on the environment.
Yeah, and it's very venue dependent, as Dewey's saying there. Lucky the Cincinnati area has a lot of talented sound engineers. And Steve Black posted on our page earlier today, and I've got to give him props for it. It's probably the best statement I saw all day on it. Was Steve Black said, hire a sound engineer, not a guy with a bunch of gear, because you can have a lot of money and go out and buy an incredible PA system, but if you don't know how to run the damn thing, it's going to sound like crap. And the more technology you get, sometimes the worse it is. I'd rather sit down myself at a old analog board than all the digital fancy stuff if I don't know how to use it. I can EQ 4 channel or 4 the mids, the highs, the lows, and those kind of things. But I can't do all that on the iPad if I don't know how to use that program.
There's a lot of cool tools in these mixers, particularly the more modern ones where everything's digital and self-contained, and your feedback eliminators, your EQs, your compressors, and everything are in one big box. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should activate every single one of those features in the stack on every channel all the time, because you do get to a point where you get so much going on that it starts to become very confusing as to where your problem is. It's always best to go simple.
And I agree 100%. I'm looking at Chris Reese's comment here. And one thing I want to emphasize today is we're not here to dog on soundmen, or we're not here to dog on bands about it. But I do want to say that oftentimes the root of the problem in my eyes that I see when the sound has gone south is that if there is a sound engineer or sound man, the band is not respecting his ears. If he says you're too loud and your guitar amp on stage is overpowering everything, or I joke with Jeff Vance at the Bell, and it's a room issue there, but I always tell him, more snare, turn up the snare. I can't quite hear it as it's piercing my ears,
Right.
there are
Yeah.
certain things that affect the whole mix. And if this sound guy is dealing with an overbearing 11 set Marshall stack, that can be tough. And you know, Kevin, you're familiar with it. The house stage at the Bell and the house band sometimes gets really loud depending on the players.
It can, and that's the big reason that Jim Cuesta and I went in-ear monitors about 1.5 years ago. So
Just save your hearing.
And the things that's up to me as to whether I crank those too loud or not. So whether I've saved my hearing is my problem then. But what it does is both of us have no ambience on stage at all, meaning unless they put us in monitors, no one else on stage hears what we're doing. But the reason we did that is because we stand on the front row and our wedges would otherwise be competing with the main sound system. So we're trying to give back a little bit of latitude to Jeff Vance in that case, so that he doesn't have as many things going on stage to have to manage in with the main system. Because if we're all up there blaring amps at every position and they're too loud, he can't do anything about it. I mean, really, the only thing to do at that point is go on stage and say, hey, we've got to turn this stuff down. And I understand volume wars happen, and that's a little bit of that's inevitable. But overall, you know, I'd agree with what Chris Reese said and several others here. You know, if you're going to have a sound engineer, they're there for your benefit. You hire somebody you trust, and then you've got to continue to trust them throughout the engagement. You can't be fighting all the time. And if it is a situation where every time we have a sound guy, we're at odds, then you got to go back and figure out what the problem is and be willing to compromise and work. It's just like working with a venue on the deal. You got to work with the sound guy on how the show flows as well. If you're constantly at odds, at very least, it's going to affect your performance as well. Thank
you, Steve Stein, by the way. That was a great comment. And Matt Matheny. So, you know, I think also, Kevin, one thing, and you know, I was just joking about respecting the sound guy's ears. One thing sound guys do like, and I've heard it from so many of them, is don't be afraid if you're a musician coming into a sound engineered environment to tell them your general notes. You know, our songs should sound like somebody getting a back massage. Okay. I mean, it should be that soft and sweet. Or sorry, man. We like our vocals really strong in the mix. Don't be afraid to say that, because every sound guy has his own idea of what a mix should sound like. And if it's not for your band, you can give them those pointers, but give them those little carrots and then let them chew on it a little bit and figure out what they can do with it.
Well, I think, we're all professionals, and we should all each be able to have a good, honest conversation about what we're looking for. Now, the time to have that conversation that you're referring to is not 5 minutes before you go on stage. You know,
not during the event.
Reach out in advance. Like Chris said, make sure they've got the stage plot. They know what they're dealing with. When you get there, the sound guy oftentimes is already going to be there wiring up inputs and mic stands and all that stuff. Make sure there's no mystery as to what the requirements are. Now, particularly, let's say, like in the case of like a house sound engineer, somebody that really knows the venue, they probably maybe know the venue better than you do. If you've played there a handful of times, they're the house guy that's been there for years. You may have your requirements to say, I want the vocals with a little high mid. I want the guitars to kind of ring in this frequency, whatever those things are. They may come back and say, well, yeah, I see what you're saying. However, there are known issues in this room where things are going to get out of control, and we might have to meet in the middle on some factors.
Right.
And that's okay, because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to put on a good performance, and we really do have to kind of put our individual hangups aside and determine what makes sense for the venue and the sound guy and the band and the audience. And it all goes together. That's the whole experience.
And on the solo side, one thing that I guess is like bamboo under my fingernails is that a solo artist comes in, sets their PA up, but they don't know how to run it. And even bands that I've been in that have their own little X-Airs and those kind of things, and they've got an iPad there and they don't know how to run it, and they're willing to pawn it off on somebody. You know, I can't tell you how many times Marcy's saying she likes a sound tech that interacts with her and that kind of thing. I can't tell you the times I've been in her venue and somebody's handed me the iPad and said, can you tweak this for us? Well, during the show probably wasn't the time for that. I can try to make it work, and you could try to make it work, but
Right.
that's really a sound check issue. It shouldn't be poor during the event. It should be good.
Now, if I happen to be at a venue on a night off, and there aren't too many of those for me, if I go in somewhere and somebody's struggling with their system, they hand me the iPad, say, "Can you please tweak this?" Well, I mean, if it sounds really, really bad, of course, I'm going to do my best to try to make that easier on everybody and contribute what I can. But if things are completely out of whack, I mean, I didn't take the gig as a sound engineer in that case. I just like give it the college try and give it back. But
yeah, and password your stuff, people. Just a little point of order, because
Right.
I could walk into a lot of places and hit on my phone and be right in your mixer. I've actually I hate to admit that I did that one night. The sound was so bad. I looked, yeah, I've got it. And I was moving faders and all those things and changing things. And the sound guy was asleep at the wheel. He had no idea I was even adjusting or doing it. That's how out of touch he was with it. So, and I hate to even admit that because that's rude as hell, but it was so bad that I wanted this band to sound a little better. You know?
I'll tell you what's really funny. And this has happened in my own band a number of times. I know it sounds like I'm throwing bandmates under the bus, but what's really funny is when somebody asks, because I'm kind of running from the stage, can you give me a little more or less of whatever? Like, okay, yeah, I'll get right on it, but I'm in the middle of doing something else. And about 15 seconds later, they said, "Oh, that's perfect." You said, "Well, I didn't do anything." So
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
if you want to
Yeah.
hear a change in the mix, you kind of end up hearing it, you know.
Hearing a change. Thank you,
Right.
Ray. That's a great thing. She says you can't run sound from the stage. The sound engineer is the only one who can hear the mix. The audience hears. That's very true.
In real time, I agree, Ray. But
Very true.
yeah.
And thank you, Monique, for that. We've got a lot of good comments coming in today. But hey, John Michael from Crown Watch. Speaking of great sound, Mark Bransford usually on their soundboard doing a great job. And I want to talk though, Kevin, about the solo guys for just a minute. You do a lot of solo work or duo work, and why do so many people not know the equipment they're using, and why don't they ever step out from behind the speaker? The new trend is to have it behind you. I've noticed they put the speaker behind them, and that's their monitor and the main.
I tend to do that as well. Yeah.
You know, that's fine if you can get by the feedback threshold and all that. But why do people not know their equipment? Is it just because they're too busy? They just run in, set up? What's the deal?
Well, it's not even necessarily, knowing the equipment is part of it, but more generally, if you don't understand the fundamentals of sound engineering, you're going to struggle. And by that, I mean, like say, for instance, like, well, for your example, like putting the speaker behind, like if I do that, and I'll do that in a small room because I don't want, maybe it's a small enough gig that I don't want to drag out the in-ear equipment, and I don't want to have to set up a second speaker aimed back at me because that's sum total more sound in a small room.
Right.
But there's things you have to apply, such as don't have the mic pointed directly at the speaker cone. You can't do those kinds of things. Start out quiet. Keep your EQs as flat as possible until you realize you need to change something, and then change it. Don't just immediately scoop all the mids and boost all the highs and go with it, because that's when you start to run into issues with things reverberating in the room and creating feedback and all of that. So I think it comes right down to being a musician and being a sound engineer are two completely different skill sets. They overlap a bit, but at the core, each of those are different things. Not
Randy
everybody's
Elder,
a sound guy.
Randy Elder here, great sound guy, by the way, that I have heard numerous times. He's got a great comment there about that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, someone's too loud on the stage, I tell them that they won't be in the mix. And that's just it. Now, if you're using in-ears, unfortunately, for some of the guys, that can be a problem. And you have to be able to get that into the mix somehow, but take it out of the mains and all those things. So,
well, I think Randy, please chime in if I've got this wrong, but I think maybe what we're talking about is if we're taking like a direct board feed from the mains, if a guitar amp on stage is too loud and they have to turn the guitar down in the mains, it inherently is not going to be on the recording. If it's somebody that's running direct, the sound guy is going to have total control over how, like particularly if they're directing the entire bands using in-ear monitors, the sound guy can completely control what that sounds like in the mains.
right.
So if you're going to have, and I agree, having a sound guy is important, particularly if you've got a budget and it calls for it, and if you're not comfortable doing it yourself. But if you're going to have a sound person, trust them enough to make you sound good in the house, and don't keep messing with your amp throughout the show. And don't keep changing the factors that you set at the beginning of set one. Those things have to remain consistent.
John Michael, thanks for that. He says Bose systems are optional or optimal.
He and I both we're actually playing a gig together next week as well. But yeah, we've each sworn by those for a long time for like the mid-sized gigs.
And there's a lot of copycat Bose stuff out there now that works equally as well too. We're not just endorsing one brand, but I have an LD system that works very well for the small stuff I do. And, it's easy to set up, easy to use. Electrum Voice has some really good stuff too. I refer to it as PA on a stick.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easy for those gigs. You walk in, you set it up, and you've usually got it dialed in a couple minutes, and it's pretty quality stuff. But what about
faults though? They get you close. They don't get you exact, but they'll get you to a good starting point. Yep.
And what about all this? Let's go back to using the sound guy, and there's so many things. You can walk in prepared, especially if you're not using your regular sound engineer. If you've hired one just for a special gig, or you go into a venue that has one. You need an input list. Obviously, it needs to be ready for the sound engineer. You need to not get started playing until he's ready for you to play up there for sound check. That's very important. He's able to fix stuff.
Pet peeve of mine is don't noodle on your instrument while he's actively checking another input.
Oh, and it happens so often.
He or she. Right.
It happens so often. And
don't give away your show by noodling before the show's actually started. Just do what they ask. Enable the sound guy to help you sound good.
And you want to insult your sound guy, as we're saying. We keep using the thing sound guy, but get his name before the show starts and call him by his name. Say, Mike, I need that up, or I need this fixed, or whatever. Not yo sound guy. You want to piss him off. That's a good way to start.
Well, it's like any other business relationship, and I know a lot of people don't like small talk. I mean, most musicians at least tolerate small talk pretty well. And really, as a professional that's in public, you've got to be good at that kind of thing. Spend 5-10 minutes talking to the sound guy before you get into the job. And just, if it's somebody you've never met before, develop that rapport with them. That's going to go a long way.
Well, and remember too, the sound guy, if he's somebody that's attached to the club, he's part of the club. So it directly, the way you interact with him directly reflects on how you maybe come back.
A lot of it's just basic professionalism is really what a lot of that is. I mean, it applies to your sound engineer, applies to your venue owner, your booker, your bar staff, anybody you interact with, you should always be your best self.
And remember, you're on the stage. That's another thing. Remember, as an artist, you're on the stage. You're a little bit removed from the customer, but the sound man is never removed from the customer. There's always somebody in his damn ear. I can't tell you how many times, I can't hear the fiddle, or I can't hear this, or, let's all try to fix it. Let's get all 600 people here tonight to try to come over and adjust this board the way they want it. It's a little crazy. I feel bad for the sound guys. I do.
Or the drummer's girlfriend comes up and says, I can't hear the drums. Well, only the kick drum is mic'd because it's a small room.
Yeah, exactly. So tell them to play harder. That's how we say it.
Right.
And the other thing is, folks, as we're talking here, and we're running out of time already. This has been we haven't even gotten near half of this done that we wanted to talk about, but everybody wants a good show. The customer that walks in the door wants a good show. You as an artist want a good show. The sound engineer wants a great show. He doesn't want to sound bad either. He doesn't want you to sound bad. That reflects on him. So if we all work together, as Kevin said, it's a mutual respect thing. It's a professionalism thing. And Eric Sears just said, I make friends with two people when I walk in the venue, sound man and the bouncer. Good idea. Good idea, Eric.
Get the bouncer on your side early. Yeah.
Yes. Marcy says she's enjoying listening to you, Kevin, reading all the comments. Yeah. Does musicians have to say check like 100 times? Or are they just craving attention? She says, don't get mad.
Yeah, maybe they just want to say check 100 plus times. But honestly, and this is a trick that I've, not a trick, but a tip maybe. And I'm not consistent with it. I mean, most of us fall into the 1-2-1-2 check thing, accidentally once in a while, at least. When you're checking, take that opportunity to announce who you are and what time you're starting. Because that's the same questions a lot of people are going to come up and ask you anyway. I mean, it really doesn't matter what your pie hole's saying into that microphone. Your sound guy just needs some sort of signal to check everything. Go ahead and make it mean something. You know, because I do agree. If you're a patron trying to have dinner, drinks, whatever, and they're just up there on the stage, you check over the jukebox and the TVs. They can get a little annoying.
Yeah, that's another pet peeve. That's fine. Dewey just wants the sound to drown out the talkers. I agree, Dewey, 100%. But Monique, that's a great topic. I'm going to put that one on my list of to-dos. Thank you for that one there. I think about cover charges for bands. That's a whole other topic. But yes, it's a good one. I do want to say, though, I think, Kevin, I've listened to you do sound from the stage. Yours is always quality. And, you know, you can do good sound from the stage as a solo duo if you take the time and don't walk in 5 minutes before your gig, throw a PA on a stick up and think it's going to work the same way it did in your last room, because every room is a little different. You know, you say you have your presets, you have your things, but you got to dial that in just a little bit. And I hate a muffled voice. I've heard more good singers sound, you know, like they're just like this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's awful.
Under the mix.
You know,
yeah. Mix your vocals first. I mean, I know just the number of years I've been doing this, you know, I go play venues where they're used to everything being loud. And the first thing they check is, okay, let's get the kick drum, you know, that kind of thing. And by the time you get to the vocals, there's no headroom left in the system. Everything else is out of control. I can't hear what the vocals are. Now, granted, it may be a band like a style of music or something where it's not that important that the lyrics be front and center. The kind of stuff I do is very melody driven and a lot of backing vocals and that kind of thing. We want to that's kind of the brand. We want that stuff to be out front and center. I put the things that you want to hear first and then bring everything else up under it.
I talked to Todd Buck about that. Actually, I asked him, I said, because I was so intrigued about his sound, and he's just a unique sound. He's got a genius ear. Mm-hmm. But Todd, he told me, I said, why are your vocals always so powerful and up front and center, but yet they're in the mix? I mean, it sounds good. It's not overpowering. He said, I worked in country music for a lot of years, and country has upfront vocals, and that's how I learned. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, you know, I mean, I thought it would be more intriguing than that, but it's just like, no, I mix country music, and country likes their vocals up front. And that's why I still do it for rock and roll and everything else.
Yeah, so absolutely. And at a basic level, that's exactly what it is. I mean, there are all sorts of technical things you could get into that guys like Todd and Steve Black and Jeff Vance and others would be way better to talk about than me. But there's also practices of, you know, messing with the EQs per input and getting everything out of each other's way. So I've heard bands with 4 electric guitars on stage and you can hear each of them clearly. Then I've heard bands with 2 electric guitars on stage and I can't tell what either of them is doing because it's just a big mud.
Right. Now, Eagles Project, I heard, talk about a blend of great guitars and those kind of, but those guys respect each other too. You know, I'm going to say this, probably get some heat for it, but there are some bands out there that the guitar players tend to try to overplay each other. There's a little competition on stage going on to see who can have the best lick, the loudest lick, whatever.
Yeah. And
that gets a little bit annoying from the sound standpoint. Steve Stein, that's a great one. Thank you. He wants to know about drum shields having any benefit. I think they do in the right venue. That's my opinion.
Well, back on your point about the guitars, a lot of that comes down to just the musical maturity and the willingness of the band to kind of rehearse through and really analyze what they sound like once they've rehearsed a song and does it work. And if not, you go back and tweak it. But as far as like drum shields and such, I'll tell you, absent all other environmental factors in the room and all that stuff, I really hate those things. Just because I don't like when I'm sitting in the room, I don't like how it takes the high end off the cymbals and all that. But there are venues where it's a necessary evil, and your sound engineer can certainly put some of those things back in. Like you can kind of pull everything down by several decibels with the drum shield. They can put a lot of things back into the mains and make it sound good. But if you've got a drummer where all they're doing is miking the kick drum and then just those shields around it, there's no microphones on the kit otherwise, it's not really going to sound that good, in my opinion. But, to each his own where that's concerned.
Right. And we've been through kind of the list of things that the bands can do for sound men or sound women. One last thing I want to talk about real quick before we go is that, some sound guys, and it and I know it, we've dealt with them, have a chip. They have a chip on their shoulder. They have been in this club for 117 years. I've done sound. I know everything. You know nothing. Those kind of things. There are those out there. Like in any other thing, there's guitarists like that too.
Right.
So you can try to get in good with the guy when you first get there. As Eric says, I go meet the sound engineer and I talk to him, and you might not be able to change his outlook on life. He may have had a really shitty life, but you can at least, make him feel like, hey, somebody likes me tonight here,
Well, we have to humble ourselves a bit and understand that, okay, maybe the sound tech seems a little grizzled when we come in. It's because their last 125 gigs, probably 115 of those bands maybe didn't relate well, or they didn't get to know them ahead of time, or maybe they've just been doing it so many years and it's been going that way for so long they've just given up. But the best
Thanks,
you can
Gary.
do is the best you can do as a band is just not be another one of those bands that creates the issue. I mean, keep on your high road and do your best to relate to people and get along with them and understand everybody's trying to do a job. And a lot of us walked in maybe not having the best day, but we're obligated to be here anyway. So let's try to understand that the best we can. But at the same time, we are trying to get a job done. So still don't be afraid to ask for what you need, but be respectful with it.
Amen. And to reverse the roles real quick as we get ready to go here, because we're running out of time. If you're the band on stage talking to the sound engineer, and the sound engineer, if they can take a little advice here from the show today, it is not all musicians suck. Okay. Because a lot of people, they do think that sometimes that, oh, this is just another gig here.
Well, most of them I think are musicians anyway.
They should be. Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes the musician's advice is decent if you'll take it as a sound engineer and say, this is the way they play. This is where we're going to be bringing in leads. We're going to do those things. That'll help the situation a little bit.
Well, both sides, both parties need to apply a little bit of a filter, just like, we might come in as a band and feel like the sound guy's being a little terse or not really working with us. They may feel the same way. So, we all just need to understand, like when somebody from like a musician or a singer or whomever is trying to give advice to the sound guy and they're using the wrong technical terms or whatever, we kind of putting my sound guy hat on. You got to kind of take that with a grain of salt and look past that and figure out, okay, what is it that they're really asking for? Maybe they don't really mean the thing they're asking for. Maybe their terms are off or whatever. Let's forgive it and move on. It's not worth getting all bent out of shape about.
Right. Sound checks are pretty frustrating. They can be if the sound engineer's not set up and ready. When you get there, you're on time. Sometimes the band's driven 300 miles on no sleep and all those other things. I had a 6-piece chicken McNuggets, all they've had to eat all day, and
right.
those kind of road things that go on. But it's a two-way street, as we've been said here. We didn't touch half of these topics. We were going to get into stage volume. We're doing a lot of things, but we touched it just a little bit. Kevin, I can't thank you enough for being a co-host today and filling in for Karis. Your hair's not on point today, but
No, I know it's not quite the same. Yeah. Not as attractive on this end of the screen this time, but thanks everybody for hanging out and providing your comments. And Scott, thank you.
You provided great technical information, my friend. And that's, from a standpoint of a musician and a person who's run sound before, I think it's very important that you know both sides of the fence here a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, none of this represents official advice necessarily. I mean, I've learned most of what I learned about the topic just the hard way, honestly. I didn't get reasonably good at it until I was bad at it for a long time and pedaled out of it to a degree. But yeah, you got to get your fundamentals down if you're going to do it. And if you're not comfortable doing it, best to hire it out and get somebody you trust and then work with them.
Thanks, Pat. Said you needed to swear more. Yeah.
Right. I was trying to bring the average back a little bit from the last few weeks.
You dropped no F-bombs today. We're doing good. We might make it through another week here, this episode of stuff. And thank you, Steve Stein, for that. We appreciate it.
Live another day.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, remember, like Kevin said, the views expressed on this show usually suck, and you don't have to take them, but it's just food for fun and thought. I do have to mention before we go, Kevin Cooper, I don't know if you saw, apparently I made a big boo-boo, and I posted on the page, what was your first concert you ever saw? Well, 4,500 as of this afternoon comments on this. I mean, probably one of the bigger posts we've ever done, but about every 20 comments, this is a phishing scheme. It's they ask you that for your passwords. What was your first concert to be a password entry type thing? And good Lord, folks, we're not fishing for your passwords. I can't remember my own. Just remember that. Okay.
I'll tell you what, next week, if you want, bring me back. We'll have a big discussion about mother's maiden names and last 4 digits. And my first pet's name, my 3rd grade teacher's last name, that kind of thing.
The guys from the band Britches Down said I could have all their passwords as long as I took over all their payments. And I thought, that was a nice deal. Thank you, Marcy from Mr. Burroughs, for being a venue owner with us today. We appreciate that very much. All the musicians that checked in. If you're watching after we're live, please make a comment. Kevin and I will kind of monitor that. He shared it on his page. I've shared it on ours. And we'll be back tomorrow at noon with Wednesday with the band. That One Party Band. Ray Renee and company will be with us tomorrow at noon.
Oh, that here. One party band.
That one.
That one. Okay.
Remember that one? Yes. You know Ray Renee.
Which one?
Ray Renee. You remember her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember her. Yeah, from like about a week ago at the Bell.
Yeah, she can sing. She's a good girl.
That's what I've heard.
All right. And Thursday, Who's Playing Out, brought to you by Froggies in Monroe, where we feature the best musicians and venues in the tri-state and where they're playing. Thank you, Kevin, so much for co-hosting again
Thank
today.
you, Scott Hall. I appreciate you.
We are going to roll on out of here with the full version of Sweet Sister Mercy's All Around Town theme song, written by Mark Robinson, engineered by Rob Nadler and company, featuring Sweet Sister Mercy Band. Thanks, Kev.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
Everyone enjoys getting out on the town for some live music. And there's nothing like going backstage and down the hall for a VIP pass to the inside information and interviews with the bands, singers, and songwriters that you enjoy. Welcome to All Around Town Radio.
Working for the weekend, and I wanna see a show. I flip on the book of face. Yeah, I know where to go. There's a man on there into the music scene, showing lots of love for the community. With great advice, I know who I should go see. So all around town radio
Show. Show. That's fantastic.
So all around town radio show.
Love you, Mark Robinson. That's fantastic stuff right there. The whole band.
We love Sweet Sister Mercy. We do.
If you don't, check yourself.
Whether you like rock, blues, folk, country, or R&B, Backstage Hall Pass delivers you a daily dose of the stories behind the music. And now, here's the host of our show, Scott Hall.
It's the Weekend Review. It's a Bible coming for you. Speaking with the fans, sometimes they don't show well. Whatever, man. We're coming, who's playing out? Off the open jam with the Who's Who of Talent. Friday night, ready to raise some hell. With all around, you know, playing to do it well. So all around town radio show. That's where I go for the latest band info. So good. So all around town radio show. To the music that comforts my soul. It's the Hollywood